there is a silence that hangs over the Santa Clara Valley in California. A silence that feels heavy, not because of what is there, but because of what used to be. If you listen closely to the wind rustling through the palm trees on South Winchester Boulevard, you might just hear the phantom echo of a hammer striking a nail. It is a rhythm that persisted for 38 years, day and night. A relentless, feverish heartbeat of construction that was never meant to house the living, but to imprison the dead. This is not a campfire tale spun from imagination. This is a story carved into the architectural history of the United States, documented in property deeds, verified by census records, and cemented in the terrifying reality of a woman named Sarah. Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. To understand the house, you must first understand the blood that paid for it. The year is 1862. The American Civil War is tearing the nation apart, turning fields into graveyards and brothers into enemies. In New Haven, Connecticut, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company is producing a weapon that will change the face of warfare. The Henry rifle, and later the Winchester Model 1866, known as the gun that won the West. It was a marvel of engineering, allowing a soldier to fire multiple rounds without reloading. But for every dollar that flowed into the Winchester family coffers, a life was extinguished. Soldiers on the battlefield, Native Americans defending their ancestral lands, outlaws and lawmen. The Winchester fortune was vast, but it was dripping with blood. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was a woman of immense privilege, a belle of New Haven society who married William Wirt Winchester, the heir to this empire of steel and gunpowder. Their union was a happy one, seemingly blessed by fate until the darkness began to creep in. It started in 1866, with the death of their infant daughter, Annie. She died of marasmus, a severe form of malnutrition, wasting away in her mother's arms. Sarah was shattered. She fell into a deep depression, hovering on the brink of madness for nearly a decade. Just as she began to find her footing again, the Reaper returned. In 1881, her husband William died of tuberculosis. Sarah was now alone. She was the sole heiress to a fortune of $20 million, which is roughly equivalent to $500 million today, with a daily income of $1,000. But the money brought her no comfort. In fact, it terrified her. She felt a weight on her chest, a presence in the empty halls of her Connecticut home. Desperate for answers, she sought out a spiritualist medium in Boston, a man named Adam Coons. This meeting is where history pivots from tragedy to horror. According to the accounts passed down, the medium went into a trance, channeling the spirit of her late husband. The message he delivered was not one of comfort, but of dire warning. He told her that the Winchester family was cursed. The spirits of all the people killed by the Winchester rifle were angry. They were seeking vengeance for their untimely deaths, and they had taken her daughter and her husband as payment. Now, they were coming for her. The medium gave her a specific set of instructions, a way to outrun the curse. He told her she must sell her property in New Haven and travel west towards the setting sun. She was to build a house for these restless spirits. But there was a catch. As long as the hammers kept ringing, she would live. If the construction ever stopped, she would die. In 1884, Sarah Winchester arrived in the Santa Clara Valley. She purchased an 8-room farmhouse and 161 acres of land. She hired carpenters, gardeners, and laborers, paying them significantly higher wages than the going rate to ensure their loyalty and their silence. And then, the work began. It was a construction project unlike anything the world had ever seen or would ever see again. There was no master plan. There were no blueprints drafted by an architect. Each morning, Sarah would meet with her foreman, John Hansen, and hand him sketches she had drawn on napkins or scraps of paper the night before. These were the dictates of the spirits, she claimed. The workers were baffled, but the pay was good, so they built. They built room upon room, wing upon wing, turning the modest farmhouse into a sprawling 7-story mansion. The construction continued 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The noise was constant. Neighbors reported the ceaseless thudding of carpentry at 3 a.m, a sonic testament to Sarah's fear. She believed that if the noise stopped, the spirits would catch her. But it wasn't just the constant building that was terrifying. It was what she was building. Sarah designed the house to be a labyrinth, a puzzle meant to confuse the vengeful ghosts she believed were hunting her. She theorized that spirits travel in straight lines and can be trapped or lost in a maze. So, she created a structure that defied all logic and physics. Imagine walking through a house where a staircase leads you up to the ceiling, ending abruptly against a solid wooden plank. There are 40 staircases in the house, and many of them go nowhere. The switchback staircase, for instance, has 7 flights with 44 steps, but it only rises about 9 feet. The steps are only 2 inches high. You have to shuffle your feet to ascend. A design meant to slow down any entity trying to pursue her to the upper levels. There are doors that open onto blank walls. There are doors on the 2nd floor that open to the outside, dropping unsuspecting visitors or spirits straight down into the garden below. There are windows built into the floor. There are chimneys that stop short of the roof. There are closets that are only an inch deep. Every corner of the house was a trap, a deception, a frantic attempt to buy one more night of life. The number 13 became an obsession for Sarah, a talisman of power she used to bind the spirits. Almost every window has 13 panes. The greenhouse has 13 cupolas. The walls have 13 panels. The chandeliers originally had 12 lights, but she had them altered to hold 13. Even the sink drains have 13 holes. It was a ritualistic repetition, a magical seal stamped onto the very fabric of the building. Sarah lived a life of utter isolation within this fortress. She never slept in the same room 2 nights in a row, fearing that if a spirit found her bedroom, she would be vulnerable. She moved through the house like a ghost herself, a tiny woman, barely 4 feet 10 inches tall, dressed always in dark mourning clothes, her face covered by a black veil. The servants were instructed never to speak to her unless spoken to. If she encountered a servant in the hallway, she would turn and walk the other way. The heart of the house and the center of its supernatural activity was the séance room. This was known as the Blue Room. It was the only room in the house that was off limits to everyone but Sarah. She had the only key. Every night, as the clock struck midnight, she would enter the Blue Room to commune with the spirits. Witnesses and staff reported hearing the tolling of a bell at midnight, a summons for the ghosts, and again at 2 a.m, a dismissal. Inside the Blue Room, Sarah would sit with a planchette and parchment, receiving instructions for the next day's building. It is said that she wasn't just hiding from the bad spirits. She was consulting with the good ones, seeking architectural advice from the other side. But one has to wonder, sitting in that dark room in the middle of the night, surrounded by the silence of the valley and the creaking of the settling wood, what voices was she really hearing? Was it the spirits of fallen soldiers? Or was it the fracturing of her own mind under the weight of grief and guilt? The physical reality of the house was oppressive. At its peak, the mansion had over 500 rooms. It was a city unto itself. But nature, or perhaps something more sinister, eventually intervened. In 1906, the great San Francisco earthquake struck, though the massive tremor violently shook the Santa Clara Valley. The top 3 floors of the Winchester Mystery House collapsed into the garden. Sarah was trapped in the daisy bedroom, pinned by the rubble. When her servants finally dug her out, she was convinced that this was a warning. She believed the spirits were angry because she had been spending too much time and money beautifying the front facade of the house, showing pride instead of humility. To appease them, she ordered the front of the house boarded up. It was never repaired. Even today, you can see the scars of the earthquake, the unfinished sections where the house was literally torn apart by the earth. She shifted her focus, building inward, making the labyrinth tighter, darker, and more confusing. The psychological toll on the staff who live there cannot be overstated. Imagine being a gardener in a place where you're constantly watched, not just by your employer, but by unseen eyes. There are documented accounts from the early 20th century of servants quitting abruptly, claiming they heard footsteps following them down the long, twisting corridors. They spoke of cold spots that would migrate through the rooms, of doorknobs turning on their own, and of the sensation of breathing on the back of their necks. One specific legend that persists involves the wheelbarrow ghost. Long after Sarah's time, caretakers have reported seeing a dark figure pushing a wheelbarrow filled with coal in the basement. Some believe it is the spirit of a loyal worker who continues his tasks in the afterlife. Others have reported seeing Sarah herself. A petite figure in Victorian dress has been spotted peering out of the windows, floating through the hallways, or sitting in her favorite chair in the bedroom. But let us look deeper into the documented evidence of the strange phenomena. In the years following Sarah's death, paranormal investigators, including the famous Harry Houdini, who visited the house to debunk the myths, found themselves unsettled. Houdini, a man who made a career out of exposing fake mediums, visited the mansion in 1924. While he publicly remained skeptical of the supernatural claims, private diary entries and letters suggested he found the atmosphere of the house disturbing and unlike any place on Earth. Modern investigations have yielded even more chilling results. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, have been captured throughout the house. When in the myriad of bedrooms, recorders have picked up whispers saying, "Help me," or "Sarah." In the basement, a voice was once recorded clearly asking, "Is this the way?" Thermal imaging cameras frequently pick up heat signatures in empty rooms, anomalies that cannot be explained by drafts or piping. One of the most terrifying aspects of the Winchester Mystery House is the Witch's Cap. This is a small, conical room in the attic that acts as a natural amplifier. If you stand in the center and speak, the sound bounces back at you with a strange, distorted echo. But it is said that if you stand there in silence, you can hear the whispers of the house itself. It is acoustically designed to carry sound from different parts of the mansion, essentially acting as a listening device. Was Sarah spying on her staff, or was she trying to listen for the approach of the dead? The sheer scale of the materials used is a testament to the obsession. Sarah bought so much stained glass that the Tiffany Company in New York had a standing order. One specific window, designed by Tiffany himself, was meant to cast a rainbow of light across the room when the sun hit it. But Sarah, in her confused logic, installed it on the north side of the house where the sun never shines. It remains dark, a beautiful masterpiece hidden in the shadows, much like Sarah herself. There is a room known as the $2,000 door room. It contains a door that cost, in 1800s currency, $2,000, and it is flanked by two elaborate stained glass windows containing quotes from Shakespeare's plays Troilus and Cressida and Richard II. The quotes speak of thoughts, of the mind, and of the passage of time. Wide unclasp the tables of their thoughts, one reads. It suggests that Sarah was deeply intellectual, deeply troubled, and trying to find a philosophical framework for her haunting. The end came for Sarah Winchester on September 5th, 1922. She died in her sleep of heart failure at the age of 82. The moment she took her last breath, the hammers stopped. The silence that fell over the house was deafening. The workers, some of whom had spent their entire adult lives building this monstrosity, simply put down their tools and walked away. There are half-driven nails still visible in the walls today, frozen in time from that very moment. After her death, the contents of the house were auctioned off. It took 6 weeks to remove all the furniture. Movers mentioned that as they emptied the rooms, the house seemed to groan. Doors would slam shut behind them. Furniture would be found, moved back to its original position the next morning. It was as if the house was resisting being emptied, resisting the end of the era. But the story does not end with Sarah's death. In fact, that is only the beginning of the legend. The house was opened to the public just 9 months after she died. Since then, millions have walked its halls, and thousands have reported strange occurrences. Tour guides tell stories of being tugged by invisible hands. Visitors have fainted in the Blue Room. Photographs taken by tourists often show orbs, mists, and shadowy figures standing in the background. The psychological impact of the house on visitors is documented and palpable. There is a phenomenon known as Stendhal syndrome, or hyperculturemia, causing rapid heartbeat, dizziness, and hallucinations when exposed to objects or artworks of great beauty or antiquity. However, in the Winchester house, the reaction is often one of disorientation and vertigo. The sloping floors, the odd angles, and the sheer repetition of the visual stimuli can induce a state of panic. It disrupts the inner ear and the brain's ability to map space. Sarah built a physical manifestation of insanity, and to walk through it is to step inside her mind. Skeptics will argue that Sarah was merely a wealthy eccentric, a woman with too much money and no architectural training, who kept building to keep herself busy and to provide jobs for the local community. They say the ghosts were a cover story to explain her erratic behavior. They point to the fact that she suffered from severe arthritis, which might explain the shallow steps. They argue that the door to nowhere was simply a design change that was never finished. But this rationalization fails to explain the fear. It fails to explain why a woman would board herself up in a fortress. It fails to explain the séances, the obsession with the number 13, and the specific instructions from the medium in Boston. And it certainly does not explain the experiences of those who have encountered the unexplainable within those walls long after Sarah was laid to rest. Consider the layout of the house again. It is not just random, it is predatory. The hallways that narrow as you walk down them, creating a sense of compression. The windows that look into other rooms, destroying the concept of privacy and safety. The staircases that force you to turn your back to the open room below. It is a house designed to make you feel hunted. Today, the Winchester Mystery House stands as a California historical landmark. It is a tourist attraction, yes. But once the sun goes down and the tourists leave, the caretakers say the atmosphere shifts. The air becomes heavy. The temperature drops. The house wakes up. There are areas of the house that remain closed to the public, sections that are too unstable or too narrow to navigate. In these dusty, forgotten corridors, the past is perfectly preserved. Wallpaper peeling from the 1900s, light fixtures covered in a century of cobwebs. Thus, it is in these dark recesses that the true energy of the house resides. Paranormal investigators who have spent the night in the house often report the most activity in the witching hour, between midnight and 3 a.m., the exact time Sarah would conduct her séances. They report the sound of an organ playing, though the organ in the house has been silent for decades. They hear the distinct sound of a ball bouncing, perhaps the spirit of a child, or maybe the echo of the daughters Sarah lost so long ago. The legacy of the Winchester Mystery House is not just in its wood and stone, but in the questions it forces us to ask about the nature of guilt and retribution. Can a physical object, a rifle, carry a curse? Can money be tainted by the blood spilled to earn it? Sarah Winchester believed the answer was yes. She believed it with such conviction that she dedicated her life and her fortune to building a sanctuary for the souls she felt responsible for. She was a prisoner of her own creation, trapped in a cage of gold and redwood. Whether the ghosts were real entities from the other side or demons of her own making, the result was the same. She lived in terror, and she left behind a monument to that terror that has outlived her by a century. As you lie in bed tonight, in the safety of your own home, listen to the settling of the house. Listen to the creak of the floorboards and the whistle of the wind. And be thankful that the walls around you make sense. Be thankful that your stairs lead somewhere. Be thankful that when you close a door, it stays closed. Because in San Jose, there is a house where the laws of reality do not apply. A house that is still waiting, still watching, still hungry for the spirits that wander the darkness. The construction may have stopped in 1922, but the energy of the Winchester Mystery House is ceaseless. It is a nocturnal ledger of death, a tally of souls that can never be balanced. Did Sarah Winchester truly escape the curse? Or did she simply build a grander tomb for herself, trapping her spirit within the labyrinth forever? When the lights go out, and the tourists are gone, and the silence returns to the Santa Clara Valley, the answer might just be found in the sound of a phantom footstep on a staircase that leads to nowhere. This has been a dive into the documented reality of the inexplicable. If you ever find yourself on Winchester Boulevard, look up at the turreted roofline against the moon. You might see a shadow move. You might hear the faint ring of a bell. And you will know that some debts are never fully paid. This is the Nocturnal Ledger. Sleep well if you can.